Are we ready to go? Hello, panelists. Are we ready to go? Yes.
I've unmuted, so I'm live now.
Okay.
Ready to go.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me just take a moment. I don't know if everyone has joined us or not, or if people are on their way in. But I wanted to take a moment, first off, to introduce everybody. Oh, there we are. Back to a normal screen. Wanted to take a moment just to introduce everybody and maybe set up this conversation that we're having, this town hall. I want to begin really by saying that we are a multicultural church, that every person that's on the screen is from New Life Community Church. And we value diversity, we celebrate it, but we certainly don't have all the answers. And part of the reason for this conversation is because we want to learn, we want to do better. We certainly want to hear all voices and help ourselves to move forward in a way that makes everyone feel safe and welcome at our church and valued at our church. And so you may be asking, if you're just joining us and tuning in, why am I here? Because I certainly don't, my face doesn't necessarily fit in with all the rest on the screen. And the simplest explanation for that is because I need to be here. Because like everyone else, I'm learning and I'm trying to, as a leader, navigate these the situations that are going on, but also to make sure that in my own personal life, as well as our leadership, that we are careful about moments of privilege. And it can be hard to see when you are a majority culture person. And it's important for me to hear, it's important for me to listen, and it's important for me to be here just to be able to say, as a church, we're committed to this. We titled this town hall, "I Can't Breathe," because of course, those were the final words of George Floyd. And they encapsulate in so many ways the feelings of a lot of people in our society, in Canada and especially America. And it's more than just his final words. It really summarizes in a lot of ways the way many people are beginning to feel about their lives because of the oppression, because of the violence done against one segment of our society, that it's not just one man, but it's hard for anyone of that culture to breathe. Sometimes it's, and you'll hear this tonight, sometimes it's, we're choked out by anger, sometimes fear, sometimes any number of hopeless responses. And I want to say that to the level that I can, I'm listening, I guess, and I'm trying to understand. I don't want to say that fully do, but I'm trying my best. And I don't believe the situation can change until we all feel like it must change, that it's a suffocating situation for every member of our society, until we become our brother's keepers and really understand that that's our role. And so I want to introduce the panel tonight. We've got a number of questions that we're going to start with. We have a number that were sent in this week, and I'm sure there'll be more as we move along. So I'm going to start with, I assume you all see this the same way I do. So I'm going to start with the person who's to my right. And, or maybe it's better if you introduce yourself. Would you? Yeah, let's let you do that, Rebecca. Why don't you introduce yourself and go my right, and then down to Jay and Wilma and Nathaniel, and then up to Pastor Chris. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rebecca Martins.
Wonderful.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Bernard. I'm happy to be here tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wilma Nevers, and I'm really privileged to be here tonight.
Hey everyone, my name is Nathaniel Smith, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight.
Hi, my name is Pastor Chris, and I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. I want to start with a simple process, and that is just, allowing the people around the room. Sometimes the best way we learn is to hear each other's stories. And if you can, for a moment, try to put yourself in that other person's story. And I want you to know that we made them pare down their story so that they can't tell every story. They can try to tell one, maybe two, because for the sake of time. But I want them to each share a story, just some way that racism has impacted their life and the kinds of things that would be normal to them that are not normal for the rest of us. And Nathaniel, you're the youngest member here. And why don't you start us off?
Okay. Well, for me, like it's like as a Black young man living in Canada, I've never really had anybody blatantly come out and call me the N-word, but I definitely think that racism is here in Canada, and I have experienced it in many ways, more subtly, whether it was someone following me around a store, or people treating me like I'm not intelligent, or I don't know what I'm talking about, or even somebody putting a stereotype on me of being a gangster or something. Those scenarios have happened to me countless times. And the place I feel like I've experienced racism the most is in the school system, actually. I went to 2 different Christian schools growing up. One I went to from grade 5 to 8, and it was a predominantly white Christian school. And I was just it was my first time being in a school like that. And it was new to me. I didn't understand everything because I came in grade 5, so I was really young. I was 10 years old. The teachers there, sometimes they would just they would lose their temper with me really quickly, or I would get in trouble for stuff that wasn't really my fault. And the students were rude to me, and I didn't understand why. But then as I grew and went through the grades, I remember being in grade 8, I started to realize what racism was and why I was being treated the way I was being treated. And I found myself in a place of frustration because I remember that year, there was a lot of Black men being killed, and I didn't feel like there was anyone I could talk to about my frustration or fear, because I just felt like everybody would just kind of brush it off and act oh, they're thugs, so they deserve it, or they'd make excuses, because it seems like whenever stuff like this happens, a Black person is killed, and we say that we want justice for it, there's always some excuse for why they were killed. So that's kind of what I was feeling in grade 8. In high school, I went back to another Christian school, and that was also the school itself was not bad, but because there's good people in the school. There'll always be good people in every place, but obviously racism is a systematic thing, and it's in this country, and it has been for a long time. And I went to the school, and there was just a lot of ignorance there toward Black people and the Black culture. And to the point, the school didn't even have Black History Month. And I thought that was so shocking to me. And that year, me and a few other Black people in the school actually got a petition together to create Black History Month. So we had Black History Month the next year. But yeah, it was wild.
Thanks, Nathaniel. No set order, so why don't I jump over to Rebecca, because it's not an age thing at all. So I'm going to jump from one corner to the other. Rebecca, why don't you talk to us about your stories?
To me, by nature, I'm usually an optimistic and want to see the best in everyone kind of person. With everything that's happened in the last little while, I was kind of really thinking to myself, have I ever experienced it? Have I ever experienced racism or felt any particular towards me? And I was really thinking about it. And then as I was thinking about it, stories just kind of popped up from my younger days. And I was just oh, wow. A lot of different instances popped up. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I just have brushed them off or suppressed them and things. So I remembered when I was really, really young, I grew up in a church. I grew up in the church, and my parents are Nigerian. So we came here, and the first church they were told to go to was an apostolic church in Toronto. So it was predominantly whites, but there were a lot of Africans as well. So I made friends, a few white people. I made good friends with one family, and I was able to finally go to their house after church one Sunday. And we were there, and then we went to go play outside. They lived in a predominantly white area. And so we went to go play outside, and then there was mention of, okay, one of the other neighbors said, okay, let's go to my house. And so my friend and his younger sister were ready and set to go, and the little girl turned to me and said, oh, but you can't come. And at the moment, I was taken aback, and I thought, okay, maybe because she just doesn't know me. But then I thought about it. This is a predominantly white neighborhood, and it's me, and I don't know what she's been told at home and things like that. So I thought about that, and I'm like, that was at a young age. I don't even think I was 10 when that happened. And then I just remembered growing up, and when I was in high school, and my team was majority Black athletes. My girls team, and to a majority white school. We went to play a majority white school, and I remember one of the parents yelling at the refs and being like, "Oh, you're not calling these as flagrant fouls. These Amazon kids are really hurting our girls." And I turned to one of my players, and I'm like, "We're playing like normal. We're not playing any differently. So why would they say things like that?" And so what I kind of realized is that I was seeing it, but I was always just brushing it aside and just kind of suppressing it and not wanting to do it and things like that. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think in Canada, because it's not in your face, it's easy for us to say, okay, it's not happening or it's not really there, but it's more undertoned. And I think sometimes that's more scarier than it just being blatant and in your face.
Yeah, Jay, why don't you tell us a bit of your journey?
Sure. For myself, my family, we've spent a considerable amount of time living in both Canada and the United States. I grew up here in Burlington, and lived in a predominantly white neighborhood, went to a predominantly white school. And, but when I was about 10 or 12 years old, my parents packed up everything and the family moved to Florida. And my parents still live there. They're retired there now. And I can remember when I had graduated college down there, and was returning to Canada with my brother. After settling in, I wanted to go back home and visit my parents. And on that trip, when I went back home and visited our old neighborhood, which we had lived in for 10 years plus, quite some time. We'd been in that neighborhood. And to be honest with you, everyone on the street knew us. They knew that our family owned a business. We had a vehicle that had the name of our restaurant on it. So people knew that we were hardworking people. There was a pastor and his family that lived up the street, and people knew that we were Christians, that we attended church. And we knew all the kids and all the families in the neighborhood. People knew us. And as I was going door to door, just to kind of say hello to everyone, I stopped at one door where there was a lady who was a single mother, a white lady with two young boys. And I knocked on the door, and she answered, and she looked surprised to see me. And she said, "Oh, I didn't expect to see you." She said, "Actually, I didn't know what happened to you. I thought you were in prison." And it was very shocking to me to have someone who knew me say that to me. And I couldn't figure out why she would have said that to me. And in the moment, of course, I just responded with typically the way I do when I'm uncomfortable. I just sort of laughed it off. But I remember thinking about it afterwards and realizing that was racism towards me. And that happened many, many years ago. That's 30 plus years ago. And that's stayed with me ever since. And I can give you one more example of when I first moved back here from Florida. I lived in Malton, a small suburb of Mississauga. Again, a predominantly Black community. My aunt lived there and was kind enough to find a place right next to hers for my brother and I that we could stay. And I'll never forget the second car that I owned was a very very memorable vehicle. It was a little shiny blue Dodge Neon. I don't know if any of you out there remember this vehicle. It's cursed. But that was my car, and it was a very recognizable vehicle. And I was so involved with the young people at my church at that time, traveling back and forth, taking them to different things. I was a leader in the church. And I was coming back from church or going to church one evening and got pulled over by a police officer. And when he approached me, I said, "Can I ask you why you've pulled me over?" And he said to me, "We're looking for someone in this neighborhood that's driving a shiny blue Neon like yours." And as far as I knew, I was the only person who owned one of these dreadful cars. Shiny blue Neon. And this person matches your description, a young Black male, and they've been accused of committing a crime in this neighborhood. And I thought to myself, okay, let's just take a moment here. The officer could have simply run my license plate and quickly determined that I've never been accused of or committed a crime. I've never even had a traffic violation. I've got a clean record. But yet there I was being pulled over and racially profiled. And I thought to myself, what do you do in this situation? You try your best to just follow orders of this police officer who has authority. You don't try to make a wrong move. You don't try to reach for your wallet. You don't try to do anything or talk back for fear of exactly what we've seen happening in the news that's been happening over and over again, of becoming another fatal statistic. And again, that happened to me over 25 years ago, and it stays with me to this day.
Yeah, the pain. Pastor Chris, why don't you share a bit of your story?
Well, when I was thinking about this question, I was reminiscing on the sermon series that was preached last year, Living Together. And that's when I got to share an occurrence that I had experienced at Bible college, of all places. But most recently, I thought about, like Nathaniel, a situation from post-secondary school. I don't live in a predominantly Black neighborhood, but I do remember just the community news of a complex being closed down at Jane and Finch. And the families were relocating to my area, Chinguacousy and Sandalwood. And there were running jokes among staff that a nearby middle school was called McCrimmon, but they called it McCriminal because a number of Black students populated that school. For me personally, I went to St. Edmund Campion, and you could sense it in the teachers, definitely. And I always remember being brought up, and a number of Black people will say this, my age, older, even younger. My parents have had the talk with me, one of the many talks when I was a young age, saying, in life, you are going to have to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, 4 times as hard as any other student. And I witnessed that in post-secondary school. It all came to a height for me when I was in grade 12 in anthropology class. And our teacher was asking each student, what's the plan? What's going on after you graduate? What is everybody going to become? And everybody answered, and I had people in my class going to Harvard, Yale, even on scholarship. And my term came around, and I said, I'm actually going to Bible college. I feel called to ministry, and I'm going to be attending in British Columbia for 4 years for a Bachelor of Arts degree. And the teacher had a completely different response to me than any other student. Are you sure that that's what you're going to do? Or are you, how could you become a pastor? Is that what it is? A priest? What kind of lifestyle is that? And in reaction to that, when anybody, doesn't matter who you are, when anybody starts to question you on your purpose, you're going to get defensive. And so, I challenged the teacher, and I said, how dare you? Of course, of course. If the Lord placed a call on my life, that is exactly what I'm going to be. I am leaving in September, just like any of the other students here. It was a little bit of back and forth, and then it all came to a height when she said, you know what, there's no need for you to be so aggressive. I don't understand why you're being aggressive. None of the other students were behaving this way. You get detention. And it was that characteristic that she placed on me, aggressive. I don't understand. I couldn't understand. If you ask me what I want to become, and I tell you my God-given calling, accept it for what it is. It was a question. I answered the question. Anyway, so I got detention, and you better believe that when you get detention, your parents are called. So Mrs. Crooks traipses her way right over to the school, and she's a very sound-minded woman. And so she comes to me and she's like, what did happen? And I told her the story. And thankfully, I have a mother who, defends her babies. And so she had a word with that teacher, but she also educated that teacher. You cannot put these labels on young Black people. You cannot call them aggressive when they are passionate. That does something to them that can change them for the worst. And so that's just something that's always been at the back of my mind. That's an occurrence and a label that I've actually continued to struggle with. That wasn't the only time I was labeled as aggressive, even.
Wilma, talk to us about your story.
So my story centers more on protecting my children as we enter the Canadian system, where anecdotally I heard that racism against Black was very prevalent. So we came to Canada in the late 1990s, and I had to have the conversation with my sons about being different in a culture where there's clear disparity, both in terms of community and systemically. That was new for them, and that was new for me. I don't recall that the conversations clearly spelled out that they were Black, but more that they were different. So for me, I spent the first 6 months of being here, not taking a job, but pretty much watching over my children like a hawk. My focus was knowing their teachers, spending too much time at their schools, going through the curriculum and deciding what books the younger one would read or not read, volunteering at the school, questioning a teacher's comment on a report card that was given, and with the help of my husband then, we got it removed from the card. So I got to know their friends, I got to know their parents. I tried to ensure that they did not, that the change coming here in this kind of situation did not rob them of their sense of self. For me, it was an investment that I made, and I'm happy to have done it because I think it paid off. But personally, it's a little different from me. I guess I have age and gender in my favor, but I've not really been into a situation where I can say I have been discriminated against or somebody has actually made racial slurs against me. But I also have an inclination to be a little defensive, maybe not a defensive, but more offensive in terms of when I see situations where racism can come up. For example, I think a common one is that people say they go into a store and people will follow them or people will watch them more than they watch other people. So for me, if I go into a store and somebody's coming, I'm not gonna wait for a racial situation to develop. I'll just say, I'm not shopping today, I'm just looking. If I need your help, I will let you know. Do we have that? Do we have that clear? Yes, okay, thank you. And I move on. So I walk into a situation knowing that I am spending my money and I have a choice, and I'm doing not myself a favor, but doing the persons I'm shopping with a favor. So I'm pretty much on the offensive in that way. If I see it coming, I'm going to address it before it comes out. Pretty much it.
Thank you, Wilma. I wanted to ask you about this week and last week, and I realized that this is just one amongst many news situations in the last, I want to say 6 months, but it's been going on longer than that. How did this last news story impact you personally? How did that make you feel? I'll start with you, Jay, if you don't mind, and we'll go around. But when you heard the news, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, go down the list, what was your reaction?
Excellent. Can you hear me?
Yep, it's perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pastor Randy. I'll be honest, my initial reaction, and still somewhat now, is anger. I'm angry. It's been something that has been very unsettling for me. I've lost sleep over it over the past week, and what's upsetting to me is the fact that police brutality is still happening in 2020. And I believe at the root of it is that it's because the laws of the land allow it to. Protests across the US right now, I believe, are occurring because there's corrupted elected officials, there's policies in policing that need to be addressed and corrected and changed. There's powerful unions that are backing them, so that police officers who shouldn't be on the force and have had several citations shouldn't be there anymore, but they continue to be protected by the laws, by these unions. And all of this is occurring while they are abusing their powers and continue to murder a disproportionate number of Black members in the community. And for me, I see that the protesters have been calling, and we've seen it happen this week. They've been calling for the arrest of the other officers in question. Thankfully, we've seen that happen, and for charges to be laid. But it's a shame that it had to come to this to allow that to happen. That right there in itself is a clear violation of the system of justice that should be working for all of us. And my feeling is extended, the anger is extended even to the leadership, to President Trump. To me, it feels like he's less concerned about setting a zero tolerance policy for this sort of continued police brutality and the abuse of their powers than he is about protecting and restoring, the U.S. economy right now. It just seems like he's more upset about seeing buildings being set on fire than he is about the loss of countless Black lives. It just doesn't seem to be resonating with him. And to me, it just seems like there's this steady undercurrent, a very strong undercurrent of racism that continues to plague the nation. And honestly, I believe that it's been there. It's been veiled at times, but it's always been there. It's been there for going back 200, 300, 400 years, back to the days of slavery and beyond. It's been there and continues to be there. I can also say that I feel, as a Black man, I feel misunderstood. And this is something that Nathaniel talked about earlier. I honestly, I feel sometimes that non-Blacks don't fully understand what it feels like to be racialized, to be perceived as violent, to be perceived as uneducated or poor, or to be undervalued and misrepresented in the media, and to not have a seat at the table in community and corporate leadership. And to me, all of that translates into our voices not being heard, and to us often being viewed as just a menace to society. And just to go back to the leadership point one more time, just before I wrap up, I'm really, it's a strong word, but I have to say I'm really disgusted with the current level of leadership that we're seeing. And it's on many levels. It's, you know, from the community level all the way up to the nation's leaders. I really think that we need leaders to step up to the plate, and silence, and I understand that sometimes you don't know what to say, or you're afraid you won't say the right thing, or that it might have some negative repercussion that might come back to bite you. But I really believe that saying nothing can often be interpreted and be just as bad as saying the wrong thing. And so we really need leaders to step up to the plate. And it's across racial divides. It's leaders in every area of our lives.
Yeah. Rebecca, some thoughts?
I guess to sum it, for me, it's overwhelmed. Just overwhelmed and stressed, mostly overwhelmed by by everything. I can tell you that I'm a very visual person, and I have not watched the video in its entirety because I know that if I do, it'll be worse than it already is in my mind. So I haven't watched the video. And so and for that reason, sometimes I need to detox. I need to say, you know what, it's not an Instagram day. It's a watch the aquarium, watch Flintstones kind of day. Just kind of not. And it's sad because I can't stop being Black, so I can't really turn it off and say I'm not gonna deal with it, or it's not an issue, it's not something. So that's why it overwhelms me, and it stresses me, and it sometimes makes me feel hopeless. But I know that I can't remain in that place of wanting to feel hopeless. I know I need to push past that. And that's why I'm grateful for my faith. I'm grateful that I have that to hold me. And then I think another big piece is worth, because when I see everything, it really questions what is a Black life worth. And I know for me personally, I struggled with self-worth growing up, and it came to a point where I had a moment with God where he kind of reminded me full force that I am his masterpiece, I am his child, and I am worthy of his love. I am worth every bit of it. And so for that reason, seeing the images and seeing everything that's happening, it sometimes puts that question there, as in, I'm a Black life. I know that I know my worth, but why are others questioning that worth? And so that's why sometimes I just kind of have to step back, but at the same time know that I've got to step back in at one point in time too. But just overwhelmed is the biggest thing that I'm feeling right now.
Yeah. Pastor Chris, I know you shared quite a bit in our staff meeting this week, just about the reaction in your house and your family over the last week. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Give us a window.
So, how I'm feeling is just very hopeless. Um, yeah, so this past week, George Floyd was murdered on Memorial Day, and every day it was just a new piece of news, just a new detail being revealed in the case, and just the story. Um, and unlike Rebecca said that she didn't watch it, but unfortunately I did. I did watch it, and um, it has changed me. I I wish with every fiber of my being that I didn't watch it. Um, to watch the life of any human being, uh, just leave them like that. Uh, I have not slept. Um, I confided in the staff, and I said, I haven't been able to get any work done. Um, I I feel as though a piece of me uh, is broken forever, and it's death, and then it's racially motivated death, and then it's having to just witness people blatantly denounce that death and denounce the premise of that death. And yeah, I'm not going to draw it out, but I'm very, very broken. I'm very broken.
It's Pastor Chris. Nathaniel, how has it been in your house this week?
It's been a lot. There's been a lot of emotions, from me to my parents to having a younger brother who like is processing and taking in all of this stuff. Like it's a lot. And I don't know, like watching these videos, especially the video of Muhammad, like to just see his body just drop to the ground like that, and like to see, like, when I found out he wasn't even killed by police, which is bad enough in itself, he was killed by civilians who decided to take the law into their own hands. I just felt hopeless. Like I felt like our lives really don't matter to these people, and they can just kill us and get away with it like that. And yeah, it was just a sense of hopelessness. And like I was just sad and upset to the point like it brought me to tears. And then when I thought I'd deal with it, then the whole George Floyd situation happened. And honestly, I numbed myself because I didn't want to feel. I didn't like. I just kind of want to like push it away, but I couldn't. And another mentor at Movement Inc. reminded me that God is close to the brokenhearted, and I can lean on Him in these times. And that's what I've been doing. I've been leaning on Him and relying on Him and talking to people. Honestly, when you're feeling like this, talking to people is the best way to deal with this. Talking to God and talking to people. He has put people in your life to support you. So don't numb yourself and don't push people away. Like, open up, even when it's hard. And I say that because I know that like even like it seems hopeless because no matter what we say, it seems like I was saying before, there always just seems to be some excuse why the person met their death, or why Black people be complaining the way they are. Like, for example, like when people say all lives matter after Black lives matter, it kind of sounds like get over it, like everybody struggles. And I feel like that's just missing the point, because all lives matter, but all lives matter. And I agree, all lives matter. But we cannot say all lives matter and then disregard Black lives. Like, there needs to be a change. And what Jason was saying with Trump, that also just made me feel like unheard, and like what we have been protesting for and fighting for doesn't matter, because he came and said that he's going to get the military and has given civilians the right to stop these protests and use lethal force against these protesters. And he didn't even address what Black people are going through or what has happened. And it's like he basically just like, it's almost like he wanted to silence us. Like, if you will not stop fighting and talking about what is happening, then I will silence you. That's kind of how I felt.
It's powerful, Nathaniel. Sister Wilma, how are you doing?
So I just share this, which represents maybe some kind of relief. So it's, I can't breathe. Can't breathe because paper and pencil are making me tremble. I can't breathe. I can't breathe because the news and the stories are bringing me worries. I can't breathe. I can't breathe because right now, as I write this, the whole world's gone amiss. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Though there's no knee on my neck and my blood pressure is in check, I can't breathe. I can't breathe, for the truth of the story is bloody. It is gory. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I see it, I feel it, and I can't suppress it. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I have sons. I have daughters in these murky waters. I can't breathe. I can't breathe because anger and hate are knocking at my gate. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. It's my body's reaction to violence and suppression. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I'm not supposed to. Why should I breathe when so many others can't? My anxiety and my worry are parts of their story. Each breath that I take is in solidarity with those who can't breathe. These words represented the way that I got a lot of stress out of my system. There was physical pain in my core. I had tightness in my stomach churned. I felt jittery. I just needed to move sometimes and do something and say something. And there was just an overwhelming sense of, I don't know what to do. There were bouts of fear. There were bouts of worry for my children and their children and their children. There were reminders of the blatant evil of slavery and colonialism, some of it done in the name of religion. There were reminders of all the Black young men in Toronto, in Brampton, in the USA, in so many different places who were mercilessly beaten and killed just because they're like me, they're Black. Angry? Yeah, I am angry too. I'm angry and I'm defensive. Because my kind, my Black people have been backed up against the proverbial corner for so long that our God-given instincts of fight, flight, or freeze are the automatic responses that we now have. Yeah, I'm angry. My people have been traumatized for so long that we are not able to function the way how we should. It is the impact of the trauma that we've been through. Sad? Yeah, I've been terribly sad. I'm like so many people who just cry, and some of us can't even identify what is the specific thing you're crying about. You don't really know. It's just that it's body's way of releasing some of the tension. We cry. We're sad. We're sad that there are those who pretend that all is well. We're sad because we have will have nothing to do with it, pretty much. And we're sad because there are those who continue to perpetrate racial discrimination, either with their noises or with their silences. But thank God, I'm also hopeful. I'm also hopeful because there are so many people who see it as a problem. I'm hopeful because there are so many non-Blacks. Yes, there are so many white people who continue to put their lives on the line for us, for their Black brothers and sisters. So that's where I'm right now.
Thank you, Wilma. There's a lot of questions that we have had submitted from people just to be answered. And I wanted to, there's one that just came in and I wanted to read a bit of it. It talks about why we're doing this. And there was some concern that in the process of us sharing your stories, that all we get is pity and not necessarily change. And our goal is not pity. Our goal is conversation and understanding. Our goal is to learn and to grow. But the final question at the end was an interesting one, and I'd love for you to answer this. Don't know if you have one for it, but this person asks, what should white people do in response to this overt systemic racism that obviously sometimes white people are unaware of? Do you have any words of advice? Go ahead, Jay. Jason?
I would, yep, just making sure that I'm unmuted there and that everyone can hear me. I would say that, you know what, a number of people are confused about a number of things right now, what to say, what to think, what to do. And, you know, some people might be confused about the actions of the police or the response of community leaders and national leaders. Others might be confused about their own thoughts and feelings and the actions and the members of the Black community, how Black people are feeling right now and wondering what they can do. And, you know, it's a difficult question to answer, but, you know, I would say this is a starting point. I would say it's incumbent upon each and every one of us to listen. Just to listen to each other. Listen to your Black brothers and your Black sisters. Listen to their stories. Listen to their suffering. Try to put yourself in their shoes for a moment and to understand the issue from their perspective. And if you agree with what you've heard, you know, talk to them about what you'd like to see done differently and how you can be a part of that solution. I'd say to people who are fearful, I'd ask them, you know, what is it that they're most afraid of at this point? You know, if you're a Black person, do you fear police brutality on yourself, on your family members, your children? And if you're white, do you fear that perhaps you may be the target of anger of Black people right now? Or perhaps do you feel that in some unconscious way you might be yourself propagating racist ideologies? These are questions we need to ask ourselves. Do you fear, you know, within yourself that the current leadership is not doing enough to eradicate racism in every form, whether it's institutional or systemic or individual? And I would say to anyone who is ignorant of the idea of racism right now as a real concept, as something that millions of visible minority people are dealing with every single day. That's in addition to the struggles that the rest of us all face. I would say to them, just wake up. so many people can't be lying about the same thing. I would say pray. Find yourself on your knees in prayer and ask God to open your eyes, that he would give you a heart of compassion, that you would begin to see the suffering, see the anguish and the heartbreak and the loss that you've heard expressed and shared amongst this panel here tonight, and of many other people that you know in the Black community around you who are suffering. Pray that God would give you a heart of compassion, so you'd understand the loss that's happening over and over again. And it's all because of the color of our skin. So pray with us.
Thanks, Jay. And feel free, panel, to jump in and help me out with any of these questions. I appreciate Jay just jumping in there and answering that. And if you have something to contribute that you want to, because obviously with all the questions we have, all 5 of you can't say something, but to every situation, but speak to the ones you feel most passionate about. Another person wrote in and asked, what is the role of the church in helping society close the gap of racial discrimination, the divide between what do you believe the church should be doing? Our church in specific, but the church in general. What steps should we be taking to make sure that racism certainly doesn't exist here, but beyond that, begin to be an agent of change? Woman.
One thing I can think of, Pastor Bob, is that like last year when we had the Living Together series, I think that was a great start for us to start talking about how we can live together as different people, not trying to be the same, but living together as different. I think that was really great start. And I think we should be having more of those conversations. I think we shouldn't leave it for a certain month or a certain time, but I think it should be an ongoing part of how we live and how we work and how we function. And I don't know how we're going to do this, but I think there should be a place that people can ask, can feel free to ask the questions that they want to ask. Whether it's white want to ask about Black story, or Black want to ask about white story, or anybody want to ask about anything, there should be a forum, a place, a space for people to start asking some of those questions and feeling free to ask them. Because there are questions. People have lots of questions, but people maybe don't know how, or not comfortable enough, or something about not asking those. So I think we need to create that space and to have more conversations in part of our everyday life. We're a diverse church. We're a multicultural church. And I think even though, like perhaps on the worship team, we see that, and in different things we see that, I think we perhaps need to speak it as well as do it. Mm-hmm. So make the conversation, have the conversation, keep talking about it, That's maybe a start.
Yeah. We got a question that I don't know if you're brave enough to tackle it, but I'll put it out there and feel free to jump in. Sent in actually from one of our leaders who asked the question, is there a perceived racism in our hiring practices? Do you feel like, and maybe it's just an undercurrent you've heard, where people sometimes think, well, all the positions don't seem to be leadership positions, maybe aren't as diverse as they should be? Is there some perception that maybe is out there? Yeah, Pastor Chris, go ahead.
I am the Black person on staff, and I'll share my experience of being hired.
You're one of two.
Pardon?
You're one of two.
One of two, sorry. Olivia is, yes, our financial assistant in that way. On Sunday mornings, I'm the only one that you see, though. That's what I was referring to. So for my hiring process, it was an absolute blessing. I was literally sought out. I will share that for the first time. I was sought out by Pastor Bob. I had interned at New Life Community Church, and after graduating the following summer, I just came back to the church. I loved it. I was going to another church, a larger church, and I just loved the familial feel of this church, of New Life Community Church. And so as I continued to attend, I remember Pastor Bob pulling me aside and sharing that he saw something in me, and it's such a simple statement, but it's just so powerful. And he needed me on staff. We need somebody like you. And he wasn't referring to the color of my skin.
Wasn't.
He wasn't. He was referring to his words, the strength that I had, the determination that I had. And he said, you can lead our people. You can lead our worship team. And that was a blessing that he'll never even know the depth of. I will say that from what I've observed of the hiring process, we do put out the job request. I'm sorry, I don't know the technical terms. And people do apply. And it's not that, like, we have had circumstances where there have been people of color, but to be honest, people of color, minorities, are snatched up very quickly. Because they're just very sought after by churches. Churches and staff anywhere, they want to show diversity. And so we can only hire from those that apply. And I would hope and pray that during that hiring committee, at least when I was hired, the board was very fair. I would hope and pray that the board continues to be very fair in their hiring process. But in turn, I also want to say and challenge, echo the words of Wilma, Black people, if we want to see diversity in our staff, our pastoral leadership, send your kids to Bible college, send your children to Bible college. I went to a Bible college in British Columbia, and I was the only Black person of 300 students, male and female. There was no Black man, it was just me. I have seen just photos of Masters, the Bible college that's closest to here, I believe, in Peterborough, where Pastor Bob taught. And diversity lacks there as well. But I remember being in high school and being, teased very greatly for the fact that I was going to Bible college. My Black peers, your parents are letting you do that? Like, not a doctor, not even a nurse, not a lawyer. And I said, no, my parents, they know the calling. And so I encourage both sides. I encourage fairness in the hiring process. I trust the board to do that. And I encourage our Black parents, encourage your children to go to Bible college and learn about the Word of God, and in turn become pastors in this district especially.
Miss Wilma.
So Pastor Chris, you're on staff, so you have to say the nice. So, however, I just have to say, Pastor Bob is approachable, because the same question that you're asking now, I have gone directly to Pastor Bob and say, the leadership does not reflect the congregation, what is going on. And he has been fair and just in answering my question clearly. And it is true what Pastor Kristen says. We don't have a good pool of people to choose from. Or we have a good pool, but they're not available. They're not available. They're all gone. So I do encourage you to send your kids to Bible school. If that's where the Lord is leading them, encourage them to go. Because we won't have pastors if they're not going to Bible school.
And I do want to say, when we use the term leadership, I'll get right to you, Jay. Jay's wife is on our board, and Wilma has been our treasurer and served on our board. And it's true that pastorally we have struggled to find, but we consistently seek for. We want the best candidate. We don't, it's not just one thing. Chris was the best candidate. And before I went anywhere, I knew she was in the church. I knew her capacity. She was the best candidate. So there's no, I need to look elsewhere. But we have a very diverse board, a very diverse elder committee, very diverse church leadership. And we pray, we are looking for a children's pastor, a youth pastor, an administrator. And those jobs are being posted as we speak, have already been posted as we speak. That God will bring us the right candidate. And yeah, we want them to reflect our congregation. Absolutely. Thank you. Jason, sorry.
I just want to echo your sentiments, Pastor Bob, in saying that I'm really glad that you made mention of, not just our pastoral staff, but there are so many different leadership roles within our church, and that we do have, minority people filling. Some of it is behind the scenes, our church secretary on the board. And I just want to say that there are so many opportunities to get involved in the local church. And you don't necessarily have to have a degree and, sort of be picked from a pool of individuals for a pastoral role just to be involved in leadership and to make a difference. My wife and I were privileged to be able to join the missions team this past year in Kenya. And Pastor Bob was with us, and we had an amazing time. And I really felt like there was an opportunity for us to step up to the plate and show leadership while we were there. And we did. We took that opportunity to do that. Many of us did. And many of us were already leaders in the community. My wife is a leader in her workplace. And we had several teachers and principals as well that were there. So we have a lot of people that are multicultural, that are diverse, that are specifically Black, that are already leaders in the community, in their professional life. We can use your skills. We can use your talent and your abilities in the church. Get involved. And as for the young people, I would say this. We have a lot of young people in our church. Our youth is filled with young people. There's a wonderful opportunity to groom them. And this can be a very informal process. This can be, someone who's already a leader in the church, someone who is a parent who's concerned and says, I want to see more young people take on the responsibility of leadership. Invite one of them out. Drop into a youth service, if that's permissible. Make the opportunity to contact, to reach out and say, you know what? Let's see if we can get something going. Let's work with the church leadership or work with some of these young people. Let's begin to groom them and move them towards opportunities of leadership, opportunities to head off to Bible college. I can even say this, sort of in echoing what Pastor Chris said. When I went to school to do social work, and this is right here in this community, this is at Guelph Humber University, I was one of 4 Black students in my program, one of only 2 Black males. My wife was actually the poster child for the engineering program that she did at Ryerson. When I say poster child, I mean her face was on the brochure. So that's literal. So yes, we do need to see more Black people stepping up and looking for those opportunities to get exposure for your kids. Get them out there. Let them see you leading. If they see you leading, they may take an interest in leadership themselves. And I'll leave it there.
Thanks. I know I'm not supposed to be part of I'm just the spokesperson, but I want to go against the party line for just a moment. because there was a follow-up to that first question about perceived hiring, and it was, do the Bible schools, because it came in as you were answering this question, do the Bible schools need to do more strategically to reach out to people of color, get them into programs? And I want to say two things about that, if it's okay, and you can feel free to respond to this afterwards. First off, we talked about, is there perceived racism in the hiring practices? And I appreciate everybody in the panel because you are knowledgeable of what we do, but the perception may very well be there or we wouldn't get the question, right? So the perception is the issue. And I'd say the same problem happens in the Bible school. If you attend Bible school, Pastor Chris, it takes fortitude. It does. I was in seminary and I'm in US. And so as a Canadian, I'm a little more sensitive. And I heard some guy going off about the he's made a comment that was derogatory towards people of color. And I lost it in class. I mean, I'm alone. What's he going to do? Chase me to Canada? But the truth is that it's hard for people of any minority culture when you are trying to succeed in another culture. But the only way that we will have leaders is if you push and if you speak up. And yeah, I did it right in class, and they actually stopped the class and sent all the students out, but I lost it on the guy, and they had to calm me down in the hallway. And I did come back to the class and apologize for being angry. But at the same time, you have to speak up. You have to say something, but you can't give up your dreams, and you can't give up your callings. And whether it's engineering or school or Bible school, you push through, because that's what's, anyway, I'm not on the panel. But I do, go ahead, Wilma.
Well, just one tiny last point. Some of us might not have children. Some of your children might be grown. You have some money that you're thinking, what can I do with that? It might be a kid who wants to go to Bible school that we can sponsor. Just saying.
Absolutely. And as much as we can, we should do that. Let me ask a question. I'll come back to some. I'm kind of filtering through because the questions are coming in, and I have some that came in early and some that are coming in as you're asking the questions. And so I'm wrestling through, do I give precedence to people who ask first, or do I get the ones that are hot right on the spot? Do we recognize, does the panel recognize that there is systemic racism in Canada and in the church? And if that's so, what tangible things can we look to see to say, hey, we've begun to make some headway with this? It's how will it be addressed? What will we do? So, yeah, Jay.
Sorry, if I could, I'd love to provide some very practical things that I think that we can consider doing to address systemic racism and institutional racism, which really is beyond. The church is part of the community. It's family, it's community, and then we have our government. And the police are an extension of law enforcement of the government. So it really is, that's the system that we're talking about that's here. And I would say that one thing that we definitely need to see happen in light of what's been taking place in the news right now is better police oversight. I think, again, as I mentioned, police are the enforcement branch of the law, and there's an expectation for them to serve and protect all members of our community. and that's regardless of your race, gender, your economic status. And so to ensure that police are carrying out their duties with the highest degree of integrity, I think it's time that we saw them being recorded and reporting to an independent body. And that one way that we can do that is by having police wear body cameras. And that way, any incident involving a police officer who's discharging a weapon or using excessive force, essentially abusing their power, can be reviewed. The tangible evidence can be reviewed, and that information can be looked at by an independent oversight agency. And just so you know, there are members of the Black community right now here in the city of Toronto that are petitioning for officers to wear body cameras. And I think we need to petition for this to occur across the province at every level of policing. I would also say that we need to build police and community relationships. Again, we're talking about something that's systemic here. So I'm really involving the church and the broader community as I'm addressing this question. Our church represents people from a broad diversity of cultures, as was mentioned earlier. Different ethnicities, different people coming from different religious backgrounds, people coming from different sexual orientations even. And so as the church, our arms are extended to offer healing, comfort, and new life to people from every corner of the earth and from every walk of life. And so I think it's time that our regional and local police, got to know our community better. And so I would say let's consider approaching our local police chiefs and invite them and their officers to come and spend a few hours each month, visiting our church, our community churches, and spending time attending church events and meeting with local church leaders and speaking to church members. And this will start the process of beginning to foster positive relationships between the police and the community, and to address and sort of build on the point that Wilma mentioned earlier about, having a forum, some way for people to begin to ask these questions and feel like they can feel safe and ask questions about race and culture in our church. I would say maybe we consider assembling a multicultural community task force within the church. And this can be used to build better relationships with our members, with the community at large, and with police. I think, a task force like this could serve as a liaison. It could be comprised of elected individuals who would represent the concerns of various diverse groups within our church, and it'd be an opportunity for people to go directly to them and bring their concerns to them, and that can be shared with leadership. And then that task force then can meet along with church leaders, with leaders in the community, with police, and that would help to, I think, build those relationships. And the last thing I would say is, in terms of building cultural awareness within our church, I would say that there's many people that have a very low sense of cultural awareness of different cultures, and unless they're able to spend a considerable amount of time with living and working and playing with people of other cultures on a regular basis, then they don't really get that exposure. So a great way for our church to be able to build that would be looking at maybe featuring a different family each week in our weekly video announcements, and as well as in our weekly newsletter email, and that could include some photos and a video of that family, and a brief discussion about their journey to Canada, and what they found difficult when they first arrived here in this country, how the church has been able to meet their needs and then perhaps they could even share something from their culture, you know, a recipe or, you know, a special article of clothing or a unique dance from their culture, something that we can celebrate with them. So those are just some practical ideas, some practical ways that I think we can begin as a church and individually, that people can begin to get to know and build that cultural awareness and begin to make an impact in our community.
Good. A number of these questions overlap, and I'm trying to make sure that I don't double up on some of them. I don't want to deal with President Trump. I think we've touched on that already. Someone asked the question, and I think we've touched on this a bit, and they admit that they're kind of playing the devil's advocate when they say this question, but they asked the question, why should our discussion be Black Lives Matter instead of All Lives Matter? Why aren't we just taking the broader statement and using that as our statement? And I think you'll answer this easily. Nevertheless, any thoughts?
I don't want to call him out, but I'd love for Nathaniel to answer. Oh, perfect. He raised his hand.
Oh, that hand. Yeah, thanks.
Like I said before, the statement "All Lives Matter," like after Black Lives Matter, kind of sounds like get over it, because like we do recognize that there are other minorities in this country, in America, that have to deal with racism and that they have problems too. But like I said, when you say all lives matter after Black Lives Matter, it kind of sounds like get over it because we struggle too. But if you are not, you cannot say all lives matter if you are disregarding Black lives. Like if we are saying we are being killed and we want justice and we are hurting, and you just say, well, get over it because we hurt too. That's not showing love. That's not showing care. Like right now, Black people are hurting. There is a lot of injustice against Black people. And I don't think that should be swept under the rug. I think we need to focus on that, and we need to address that, because like it's been happening for years and it needs to stop. Like it's, I don't know, like, because there's 400 years of oppression, and then we are still being discriminated against, and like we have to deal with racial slurs and all this other stuff. So like it gets to a point where we're tired and we want to be heard and we want to be supported. All lives matter, but like we need to be supported in this time. So yeah.
Yeah, I liked what someone said. I don't know if it was yesterday when we were talking and preparing, but until Black Lives Matter, you can't say all lives matter.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a good way to summarize it. Someone said, it's more of a statement than a question, but I'll put it out there for you to comment on. They said the church needs to stress and educate religious and moral sense of fundamental equality towards Blacks. The church needs to unequivocally denounce these insidious behaviors which denies or places obstacles against equality. Are there ways we could be more effective at doing that, or do that? Maybe you feel like we haven't done that at all. Are there ways that the church can be more effective at stressing equality in our church?
I don't have all of the answers, but I definitely think just speaking out about it when these things happen to support our Black people, like the churches like you or the other pastors, but also different people in the church, like white people in the church, can reach out to our fellow people of color and just say that I am with you and be an ally in these times. Because like, to be honest, like during these times, not a lot of like other than Bobby, who like has reached out to me personally to say he's supporting me. And actually, yesterday, Greg also said something to just say that we are supporting you and we are with you in this time. But not like oftentimes when these things happen, not a lot of people reach out and ask you how you're doing or how you're feeling. So I think just more of that needs to happen.
That's good. Any thoughts, Rebecca? You've been quiet up in the corner there.
I echo what Nathaniel says. I think the church has done, like, for example, even this. Let's look at this. It's a step. It's a step because the conversations have to be had. So, and as uncomfortable as they might be, they need to be had. So things like this, and even last when we had the sermon, I think there was something that happened a year, because unfortunately this happens too many times, and there's always these messages in these scenarios in media, and it reminds us that this is happening all the time. But I think even in the sermon, the Sunday after, I can't remember. Unfortunately, there's been so many names, there's been so many people, it's happened so many times. But I remember Pastor Bob made mention of it in his sermon, and he made mention that this is not right. This is not what we believe in. This is not how things should be going. So even hearing that from the top, that makes a difference. And that's a way of, we're with you. We see you, we're with you. And that goes a long way in and of itself. And I agree with Nathaniel that the person that I'm sitting beside in church, if they happen to be non-Black, I know it's weird to turn, I could only imagine how weird it would have to be for a non-Black person to turn to a Black person and say, hey, I know a lot of stuff are going on and I don't know what to say. But even just saying something means a lot. It means that you care, because you not saying anything at all, I can read that also as you being, I don't really care about what that, I don't really care about it. And that's what you don't want to happen. So it's to say something, even if it's just something small, have the conversation, say that we love you, we care about you. And yes, because it might not be you, but what if it was you? What if the shoe was on the other foot? So yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, if I can read between the lines a little bit too, is that we do need to be more of a family than we have been, or we won't be able to have those conversations, or it's hard. And we had this question, and I mentioned it to you last night when we were talking. I didn't know how to exactly address it. It was about someone who came to our church and had a bad experience. They tried to approach somebody, and a white person, and felt like they were dismissed because they were Black. Is there something that you might want? I realize that these things happen. It can happen from a person of any color at any time. We have bad days and we don't feel like talking. But is there some way that we can try to address that? Something you would want to say to someone who's come and had a bad experience like that?
I would say that I am sorry that that happened to you. I know that racism can happen anywhere, and even in the church, it can happen, because I went to a Christian school and it happened. But I would also say, don't group like the whole, but just because what that happened to you is one person, don't let that one person group, like don't group the whole church into that one person, because we are still, and not even just the church, don't group God into that one person, because God is for racism. He hates racism. He loves everybody. And as Christians, we are called to be like Christ. So we are called to hate racism as well. It is sin and we will not stand for it. And yeah, I'm sorry that that happened. And I hope that you can forgive the church and also the person that did that. And yeah.
answer. I don't know. Some of the things that are coming in, it's too hard for me to fully address. Let's ask this question: what can we do? We need to get to that point now. What can we actually do to begin the process of change? What are the steps forward? We're down to our possibly last couple of questions. But what can we do to move ourselves forward and make a difference?
Can I start?
Yeah, go ahead, Wilma.
So I thought of what can we do, maybe in different ways, more micro level, what can we do? I just want to encourage Black parents. As Black parents, train your children to know who they are. God told the children of Israel through Moses, write the words that he said upon their hearts, write it on the doorpost, write it here, speak it when you rise up, speak it when you sit down, that kind of thing. Train your children to know who they are. But in order for you to do that, you also have to know who you are and be comfortable with who you are. So you need to train your children about who you are. Speak the word of truth over their lives. Teach them that over and over again, and let them be able to say that over their own lives. Don't let the corrupt system have the last word for you. I'm thinking about the education system in some ways. You need to know who is teaching your child. You need to know what they're teaching your child. You need to be able to take the time, no matter how busy you are, to go into the schools and know what is happening to your child. You need to know the teachers and know when the teachers are telling your children that they can't apply for university because they're not going to be able to make it. They're supposed to do the skills training program. You have to be totally involved in the life of your child. You need to know the friends of your children and their parents. You need to choose carefully the families who are your friends. You have to do that. You have to advocate for your children. You cannot treat them the same way like the system treats them. You have to be their ally. You have to be there to support them through the difficulty. And you have to tell your children the truth about racism, though in appropriate ways. Black people in general, my thoughts are we must be proud of who we are as Black people. We have to be proud and we have to own our Blackness because we are Black and God carefully chose us to be Black. He didn't want us to be any other way or he would have done differently. He didn't make us a mistake. We are Black, we're truly Black, we're proudly Black, and we own it. We must not apologize for being Black. We were carefully created, crafted with a generous dose of melanin, and we need to embrace that because that's who we are.
And we're jealous.
We must not try to appease others or apologize because of who we are. And we must not wait to be appeased by others. Even in this current situation, I just want to put it out there. My involvement is in this conversation tonight is not to appease anybody or not to seek to be appeased by anybody. We cannot sweep another Black man's blood under the carpet. It will not work. It has not worked. It has not worked for 400 years and it won't work now. We won't wait for respect. We won't wait for apology from anyone else because it might not come. And if it does, it's a good step, but it's not the ultimate solution. So my encouragement is please do not wait on the external system to solve the issues that are here. We have to start at the micro level. We have to start at ourselves. We have to start in our families, in our churches, in our communities, in our schools. We have to be the agents of change in our own lives. For our non-Black friends, for our white friends, for our friends of other communities. Before I say this, I just want to add, as I was talking about this today, there is another group of people in Canada who are treated similar to us, our First Nations brothers and sisters. Yeah, my heart goes out to them because very often we're in the same boat. Right? Yeah. So my heart goes out to all our First Nations brothers and sisters. Our hearts are with you. For our non-Black friends, thank you for your support. Some of you have been putting your lives at risk for this cause because you understand that in this system, every part, every one of us affects the other. It's like the body of Christ. The hand needs a foot, the foot needs the ear, etc. For those who don't understand us, ask us, listen to us, empathize with us. Don't be silent when others are racist. That's a big thing. Pray. For those who are still racist, this is going to continue, so get used to it. Black people are not going to go anywhere. We're going to be here forever. We're going to be in heaven with the loud music and the bright clothing and the dancing. Just who we are. We're just going to be here. But seriously, let God search your heart and see if there's something that needs to change.
Yeah.
Where am I?
Nathaniel.
That Wilma, that was kind of big. Like I agree with everything you said. Just to add to it, I for our Black people, what Wilma was saying, like teach your kids who they are, teach them who their identity in Christ is, and teach them their history, because the school system only teaches them that we are slaves, and they need to know that we are so much more than that. They need to know the great inventions we have made, the historical movements, even beyond that, to our culture, our clothing. Like just teach them their history so that they know. For white people, also teach your kids, teach them that like their color is a thing, and that they have a privilege that we do not, and help them to understand that racism is not okay. And just because we have different skin colors does not mean that we are any less than them. They need to understand that there is a system that is racist, and it wants to eradicate Black people and like put them down and just keep them in a low place, and that is not okay. Teach them to be allies to Black people, to support and love them. And yeah, so the church continue to speak out and support Black people now, and just keep doing it for forever. And yeah, it's not going to stop. We're not going to be silenced. We're going to keep speaking out until this is like finished with, like it's done. So
One of our future leaders here, Nathaniel. How about you, Jay? What can we do? What are our next steps?
Well, I definitely mentioned a few earlier in terms of, how we can really connect with our community, connect with our law enforcement, and begin building some of those bridges, and establishing some accountability there to reduce harm. But in terms of building relationships, as I had mentioned, within the church, I think we can begin to highlight and celebrate our differences more. And I like what Wilma was saying about, God had mandated that the Israelites write the word of God on your doorposts, write it on, and even when you look back in Exodus, they had to have it on their forearm, and on their forehead. And so that says something about the written word as well. And I think that perhaps we can do more in terms of our mission statement, to really highlight inclusivity, to really highlight that we are a church that celebrates diversity of cultures. That and that can be in any print form that we have, in our newsletter, and in our announcements, anything that you can think of that's print. It serves as a reminder to us that we're here, and we love that we're all here together. I think as well, people can walk by a sign. So we need to show it, we need to demonstrate it, and perhaps we need more opportunities to show love toward one another. So that may be in the way of, creating more events for us to celebrate that diversity. I love when we have that dinner around Christmas time where we get to have everyone come with all their different delicious dishes from their different cultures, and we get to share and enjoy that together. That is amazing. So, but why one time a year? We have the summer. We'd love to, church people love to eat. Come on now.
In groups
We've
of
got
five right now.
We do. And we can pitch a tent in our backyard, which is huge, and have a big old barbecue. And we can have every kind of food imaginable up on the grill. So, maybe I'm just hungry as I'm saying this, but I think I think there are lots of opportunities for us to celebrate our diversity, not just talking about it, not just seeing it written down, but practicing it. I think once you create those opportunities, you'd be surprised at how people have little conversations and they get to know people. It was so funny. I'll never forget. I was at church, and I think it was a part of a small group that we were doing. And I was just chit-chatting with someone that I never usually talk to. We just had the opportunity to talk. And the person said to me, I've known you. We sit just a few rows apart from you on the same side of the church. And they're like, I've never had a conversation with you. I don't know anything about you. And I thought, how strange that you can, and it's the same thing. It can be the same thing at work, in a cubicle, it's someone who's 2 cubicles down from you. And you're like, wow, you're from this, you grew up in the same neighborhood I did. I didn't know that. So I think we need to really, go beyond just the turn and greet your neighbor, which is hard to do now with COVID-19. But I think we need to go a little further in creating opportunities for us to connect. Connection, we love that word. It was one of our building projects, to connect with one another and get to know each other and have opportunities to celebrate our diversity.
Good. Any thoughts, Rebecca?
So I would say that acknowledgement is key. So it's more of a, I see you and I see it, because when we turn our eyes and play a blind eye to it, it helps no one. So that would be one thing. And then a willingness to listen without judging a person's pain. So if a Black person is speaking with you and telling you, this is what I experienced, even though you may not have experienced it, be willing to listen and not judge that they're in pain and that it hurt them, and not then say that, and not then overshadow their pain with your guilt, because guilt is not going to solve the problem either. It's not going to fix the problem. It's not going to help the situation at all. But if I know that you're listening to me, it will let me know that when you see something like this at another time, or if you're in a situation like this at another time, you'll remember what I said and be like, oh, wait, that my friends, or they saw that was actually seen, that's actually can be considered as racist. Let me not do that, or let me speak up about it. And having the uncomfortable conversations. Yes, it might be uncomfortable to have to talk about race, but it's uncomfortable to have to live in a racist society. So get past that. And it's true that uncomfortable situations, think about it. Birth is never comfortable. Giving birth is the most uncomfortable thing in the world, but it gives you the beauty of a child. So if you can be in that temporary, uncomfortable situation of speaking with someone about how they feel and how we can change and how people should do better and how we can move forward, it will help heal, it will help, and it will help us move forward. The biggest thing for me, I would say, though, is teaching our children. It's important to, yes, like I echo Wilma and Nathaniel when they say teach our Black children their worth, their importance, and their heritage. That's very important to do. And it's also important for non-Black people to teach their children that it's not enough for you to just be polite and to not say mean things, but it's important also for you to be an ally. It's important when you see wrong being done, you speak up for the person that can't speak. You advocate on their behalf, because it's very important, because it all starts at home. It all starts at home. Whatever is being said at home, best believe that your children are going to take that out and they're going to say those same things outside. They're going to do those same things there. And remember that you can tell them one thing, but it's what you do is what they're going to do. So if you tell them at home, be nice to Black people, and then you go out and you're not so nice, what are they going to do? They're going to do exactly what mom and dad did. So it's very, very important that we pour into our children. We pour love and life into our children. The same way we want them to be great human beings. Everyone wants their children to grow up to be great human beings. They have to understand that, unfortunately, the system that we live in has caused it to be a little harder for others. And then they should be, and think about it, if they see that, and if they see that you're passionate about wanting to eradicate that, they too will grow up saying, I don't want that for my friend either. I don't want this to continue to be a thing. I don't want us to continue to have these conversations. I saw a sign the other day that said, I'm marching for so my grandchildren won't have to. And I thought to myself, our ancestors marched so that we wouldn't have to. So think about it. We shouldn't have to be continuing to do the same thing. And it seems like, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and wanting a different result. We've got to change, and it's going to start with what we're teaching and telling our children at home. And my other point is, it's, yes, the church is very important. So home, very important. Carry it over to the church, very important. We all work. We all work, and we're all able to be in rooms and in spaces. It's important that those that have the power and have the ability to enforce change, like the upper management and things like that, if you have the opportunity to talk to them, or you're in those spaces, advocate in those spaces. Don't walk out of fear. Don't work out of fear that, oh, if I say something, this might not be perceived well. It needs to be said. There's no way that boardrooms are going to change and that diversity is going to be pushed in there if there's not a willingness to have it happen. Yes, there's one thing for us to say we're gonna work hard and we're gonna do this, but if the ceiling's still there and we're not welcomed there, how are we really gonna get there? So an environment that welcomes us is very important to create. And the only way to cultivate that is from people speaking up and actually doing the work in order for that to be inclusive. The word inclusive, it's such a pretty word and people use it all the time, but it's very important to enforce the change to ensure the true inclusion.
Good word. Our time is actually supposed to be over. So Pastor Chris, I'm going to give you the final word tonight before we let everybody go. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and for listening. And I just want to say, because Chris, you are literally going to get the final word, that we are listening as a person who lacks color. Somehow I didn't get enough melatonin at birth, but we're listening, and we are striving to do better. And so thank you for all that you've been sharing, Pastor Chris. Give us some final words, thoughts, what we can do, what we need to hear.
No pressure. I would say to our Black community, please, please, please focus on your mental health during this time. That common phrase of feed fatigue is going around, and I am telling you, it is real. Do what you need to do to recuperate. Do what you need to do to re-energize and to find life again. Get into the Word, get on your knees, play that worship music, talk to someone, go for a walk. The weather is nice. I cannot um, advocate for this enough. It's unfortunately for this specific issue, it will bombard you every step, because it's not as simple as, you know, shutting down that social media. You see your blackness in the mirror when you go to the washroom. You know what I mean? It's everywhere. So please do what you can um, for your mental health, to remain um, just sound of mind, and just remember that God is on the throne. I echoed that to Movement Inc. earlier today. God is on the throne, and He is watching, and He hears the cries, and He knows our hearts. To our white community, to the allies, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the boldness that you've shared recently. It is the strongest, that term's going around, allyship, I should say, that I've seen in my mere 28 years of life. I have never seen such strength. I have had some great conversations. I've had a number of people check in on me, which has never happened before, and I thank you for that. For those that are struggling with their advocacy, let me be bold in saying that we've been hearing the term listen and learn, but we need you to just listen. This is not the time to be comparing experiences. This is not the time to roll out statistics. This is not the time to share the bad apple concept. You must listen. And that's a new concept that we all have to learn, because usually in conversation, you listen to reply. But for the first time, you might have to listen just to listen and learn. For the first time, you do have to listen to just listen and learn. And, you know, I don't want our white community to think that we are just Black people angry at every white person. That is not it. We are a hurting people, and we are longing for you to hear us. We are longing for you to hear our stories. Hear us. We've a number of us have bottled this up for years, and for the first time, we are willing to share, and we ask that you hear us. I also want to say that healthy dialogue is possible. It is very, very possible. I have had remarkable conversations with the Thetfords this week and last week. That's a family that has really helped me out in these last few days, because, and that extends all the way to Ashley, who's not even in Brampton. You know what I mean? Healthy dialogue is possible. They sat and they asked questions, and I responded, and they listened. It sounds so basic, but we haven't really gotten it down yet. And so I ask that we really try and focus on that.
Blessings. Thank you, everyone. God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Bob.